Welcome in for another episode of SODFS, brought to you by Sons of Dynasty and True North Fantasy Football. I am your host here, Dan. You can find me at Dan Brown NFL. And here to my right is my co-host, my self-esteemed partner in crime, Nate. You can find him at Nate_FFL on Twitter. Nate, Thursday night, back in the coop. What's happening, man?
Things are going well, buddy. For a change, we're meeting up on a Thursday night where crap hasn't been super stressful. We're watching a very entertaining game, as we were both talking about before the show, and we're here to talk the main slate on Sunday. What's good with you?
Man, just a busy day at work and just trying to get ready for this week. Lots of injury news. Did a little bit of showdown here tonight. Bobby Trees, hopefully squeaky wheel getting the grease. He's looked good thus far. I think he's 4 for 4 for 52. But we'll see how this game progresses. But I'm excited to talk about these Sunday games. Got a couple of good games, a couple of bad ones. Typical stuff here. But I'm ready to get into it whenever you are.
I'm ready, buddy. Let's jump into our first game on the main slate on Sunday, which is Broncos Steelers. The first player that we have on tap here is Najee Harris at 6,900. I'm not sure how interested you are, but Najee's been kind of up and down for me this season as far as interest. Right now, he has back-to-back games with at least 14 carries. He also has 26 targets, 20 catches, and 131 yards receiving in that span. Pittsburgh is a 1-point favorite over the Broncos. So as we look into this weekend, it's kind of like, where do you want to lean with Najee? The price that if we're looking at the price tag, in my opinion, I think it's kind of like the maximum of what you want to pay for Najee right now. So for me, I'm kind of leaning like I'm not super interested. I'll throw him in a few lineups, but it's 6,900. It feels like with what he's put up, you're hitting your max at that point. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, that is pricey at this point, but he's been getting the targets and in this format on DraftKings PPR. I mean, those targets are everything. And if he's getting potentially double-digit targets or even close to it on a weekly basis, I do love me some Najee. Just Big Ben doesn't seem to be able to throw the ball. The Steelers are once again, kind of standing behind Big Ben and reaffirming that he is their quarterback moving forward, even though the crowd seems to be growing restless with the performance from Ben Roethlisberger thus far. And his inability to really move the ball down the field bodes well for Najee Harris and the dump-off targets that he's going to continue to see until we see anything different. But the only other guy on the Steelers that I'm currently interested in is my continued go-to Deontay Johnson, coming in at 6,500 this week. Deontay Johnson ranks first among wide receivers in targets per game with 11.7, eighth in fantasy points per game, 19.4, and the Broncos have allowed 31.1 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers this season, which is good enough for 15th in the league. Deontay continues to garner double-digit targets on a weekly basis and seems to be another one of the only confident plays we have there in Pittsburgh at 6,500. I don't mind getting some double-digit target exposure to Deontay Johnson again this week, even though they are playing the Broncos that, have been known to lock down wide receivers in the past. This year, they don't quite seem to have the same magic there in the secondary.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, everybody basically from the Steelers wide receiver field has been disappointing this season. There's nobody that you're excited about. If you look across the ball at the Broncos, for me, honestly, there's nobody I want. I mean, as far as DFS goes, there's no one you're excited about. There's no one you want to plug in. There's no one you can play. There's no value. So, we're going to move past that and probably kind of move on into the Dolphins Bucs game. So that game, Dolphins versus Buccaneers, is a 48-point over-under projected point total. So there's some interesting things here. Leonard Fournette is somebody interesting for me because if you've watched any games this year, everybody that's ran against the Dolphins has just ran up the yardage. It's been, it doesn't matter who the running back is, they've just ran it up. So Fournette has rushed 20 times for 91 yards and 3 receptions for 47 yards. And Sunday's 19-17 win over the Patriots. He had his 20 carries was nearly half of his total on the season through the first 4 weeks, which was 44 carries. It was also a positive sign for Fournette's fantasy managers to see the running back remain involved in the passing game, as he is currently on pace to finish the year with 60 catches. He also has a touchdown. Last week he had a touchdown poached by Ronald Jones, so we all seen that. So the basic thing you want to learn, you want to hear is that this week everybody can run on the Dolphins. With Fournette in the lineup, he's gonna put up big points. Ronald Jones has been almost a non-factor. He scored a touchdown that's not going to happen every week last week. So as the Bucs and the Dolphins face off this week, you're going to want to, put Fournette in your lineups. He's 5,200. That's really, 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 really cheap, honestly. And you're going to want to zero in on that, that point total and try to get, those points, because Ronald Jones is not going to be the back. He might get a garbage time touchdown, but, that's where you're going to want to focus on. And it's perfect for Fournette this week at 5,200. That's a cheap price.
Yeah, I absolutely love Fournette at that price, 5,200. He's one of the running backs in that price range that, you get below Fournette and all of a sudden there's a lot of variance in play. I feel like we know at this point what Fournette is, and that is the lead running back for the Tampa Bay Bucs, which can be a potent offense, and any given week Fournette could get 2 or even 3 touchdowns. So 5,200, I don't mind that price point at all. Let's talk about wide receivers, though, from this game, starting with Mike Evans. 20% target share through the first 4 weeks, 37 total targets, and 22 in the last 2 weeks. Fantasy points average out to about 16.5 fantasy points per game. But if you remove his week 1 outing versus Trevon Diggs and the Cowboys, the average would jump up to 20.2 fantasy points per game. Both in cash and GPP this week, I think Mike Evans is in play. With Gronkowski going down, and as long as he continues to stay out, I think Mike Evans really is that red zone threat that Tom Brady's going to be looking for there when they get into the red zone. And he's getting the targets to boot. Where are you at on Mike Evans this week, Nate?
That's a big deal, too. If you remove that week 1 outing versus Trevon Diggs, he's the Dallas Cowboys cornerback that's, sniping all these quarterbacks, left and right. So if you take that out of, consideration, Evans is having a pretty fantastic year at 20.2 points per game. That's pretty solid. I love Evans this week, cash or GPP, as was mentioned. I think it's great for both. I think Evans is a monster. I think you can't go wrong putting him in both. Kind of moving on past that into another wide receiver for the opposing football team is Jalen Waddle. Waddle ranks 25th among wide receivers in targets per game at 7.8. He is 28th in target share at 21.2. And while most hesitate to put this matchup against the Bucs, to play Waddle, I think it's a pretty solid matchup, really. I'm not going to go against it. I think that the Buccaneers defense is, they in the past they've been really solid, but this year they've given up big pass plays. So I'm not afraid to play Waddle this week at 4,800. The value is really good, so I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett seems intent on getting him the ball while the ADOT remains low. Once again, if you're garnering double-digit targets on a weekly basis, which has been the case essentially since Brissett took over under center, 4,800 is a great price. And with Tampa Bay's beat-up secondary right now, I think Waddle could definitely take advantage. While the big play hasn't quite broken yet, this could definitely be a week for that big play to happen. Staying on the same side of the ball, though, at the tight end position with Mike Gesicki, he's emerged into a startable asset over the last couple of weeks, ranking 3rd in fantasy points and 2nd in targets at the position. The Buccaneers have struggled against tight ends, allowing the 3rd most fantasy points. And as I mentioned, their secondary is in shambles right now due to injuries. I think Mike Gesicki at 4,200, if you're not looking to pay up at the position this week, but not wanting to dive down deep into the barrels where I typically like to go, Mike Gesicki is a fine option at 4,200.
Yeah, I like Gesicki a lot this week. He's put up some pretty solid numbers the last few weeks after putting up some really kind of disappointing numbers the weeks before that. But so this week, Gesicki at 4,200, you really can't beat that in DFS. I mean, you're not going to find a better option really, maybe besides Ricky Seals-Jones at the bare minimum of 2,500, but we'll get into that later. So as far as, average price tight ends, I love Gesicki at 4,200.
All day. Let's move on into the Eagles and the Panthers. 44.5 set for the over-under right now. This is a game that's kind of got some appeal to it, even though the point total is not quite there with what you're looking for. I think there could be some value had here this week, starting with my guy Jalen Hurts coming in at 7,000. Jalen Hurts fantasy scores through the first 4 weeks read as follows: 28.8, 21.8, 25.5, and 31.2. He has 7 touchdowns with just 2 interceptions total on the season and has thrown for over 300 yards in each of the last 2 weeks, including 387 yards this past week in week 4. The real upside comes, though, with his rushing ability, having 34 attempts for 226 yards and 1 touchdown. He is an absolute, genuine dual threat quarterback, which we all know at this point is great for fantasy football, no matter the format you're talking. And he currently sits as QB3 on the season. I was a big advocate for Jalen Hurts this offseason in Dynasty and in redraft. And here he is. He's come through. While it hasn't looked pretty each and every week, he's doing exactly what we talked about him doing, and that's having to put up big points. And whether it's through the air with the deep balls or the rushing ability that we've talked about, which, is a great stability for his floor on a weekly basis. 7,000, I just don't feel like is quite enough, even versus this tough Panthers defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'll play even devil's advocate for a minute, even though I'm a big Hurts guy. Last week they faced the Kansas City Chiefs. So obviously it's going to be a more up-tempo game. It's going to be more high scoring. It's going to be more, throwing and, things like that. But despite all that, no matter what, Hurts has proven himself to be like, I hate to say it, but he's like the poor man's Lamar Jackson. He's running, he's throwing, he's doing everything. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, but he's great for fantasy, and people are still disrespecting him. So that's one thing I really hate to see is Jalen Hurts just not getting the respect he deserves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's talk about the other quarterback, though. Kind of surprise, standout quarterback thus far through the first 4 weeks, and Sam Darnold coming in reasonably priced at 6,600 this week. Sam Darnold has surprised thus far through the beginning of the year. It kind of got to a point, though, where we were kind of in on DJ Moore. CMC is back. Robbie Anderson, the Terrace Marshall rookie hype was all coming to effect, but yet nobody was buying into Sam Darnold. And here we are 4 weeks in, and he has come through with a couple of rushing touchdowns this past week. 6,600. You going to be building any lineups with Sam Darnold this week?
I just want to say how do you not, at this point, Sam Darnold is statistically the NFL's best rushing quarterback, and that's not a joke. It's also not sustainable, but for right now, as we head into week 5, that is how it is. I want to give a quick shout out to JJ Zachariason for this stat that I listened to on his podcast the other night. Darnold has 5 rushing touchdowns on 20 attempts, which breaks down into 1 touchdown into every 4 attempts. If you do basic division, since 2011, NFL quarterbacks have averaged a touchdown on every 24 attempts, which makes Darnold statistically 6 times more efficient than any quarterback in the league in terms of rushing touchdowns. I'm not pointing that out as a fantasy stat that you want to jump all over. It's just funny. I think it's kind of awesome, especially for Sam Darnold, who was kind of laughed upon as a joke of, the NFL and quarterback when he was especially playing, for the Jets. Props to Sam Darnold. Props to Sam Darnold for showing everybody up. I think it's awesome. But as we head into week 5, and taking things seriously, he does rank as the QB5. The fact of the matter is he's the QB5. He has a 297.3 passer rating. As I mentioned, 5 rushing touchdowns. He's facing Philly's defense. They're middle of the pack against run. They might not do too hot against him, They're giving up 19.69 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. This is a good game for Darnold. While it's not sustainable, he could easily keep his momentum going. I think we see a game where Darnold still produces. I don't think it lasts all season, but I think this week versus Philly, we still see him put up solid fantasy numbers. So I'm not off the bandwagon yet. It's coming, but it's not going to happen this week versus Philly.
Well, we can't bring up Sam Darnold without talking about his number 1 wide receiver in DJ Moore. 7,500 this week. Price jump alert. Is that expensive? Yeah. 7,500 for DJ Moore is expensive, but he's garnered the targets on the season of 8, 11, 12, and 12, and gone over 100 yards in each of the last 3 games, while scoring 2 touchdowns this past week. As it stands, the Eagles are 24th in pass defense, DVOA, and Moore showed us last week he can produce against any cornerback that the Eagles can line up against him. While the price is expensive this week, I kind of am buying into DJ Moore at any price at this point. The way Sam Darnold seems locked on into him, and Christian McCaffrey, rumors are that he could be back as early as this week, was practicing again today in some capacity to any extent. The coaches seem optimistic that he might play this week. He was quoted earlier saying that he feels good, he feels ready to go, and that he's optimistic that he will play. I'm still not sold. 8,700 this week. We'll have to keep tabs on that before we can make any sort of call. But typically in this situation, I tend to lean towards the wait and see it 1 week before I invest my dollars, especially when we're talking about 8,000 plus for any given player.
Yeah, until we know more, there's no way that I can lock CMC in. He's literally my favorite player right now. But we have to know more. There's no way any logical fantasy manager is going to lock him in. We have a few sleeper leagues that we're in that I've inserted him in, but I'm going to have to see more real quick before, I feel confident that he's starting. If you were to ask me today, do I think he's starting this week? I think he does, to be honest. I think he does. I don't think he would have practiced this week if he wasn't starting.
And what kind of ownership do you think we'll see if they do announce Sunday that CMC is indeed playing and starting? And let's say they don't come out and say that they're going to cap his reps to any extent, just that he's healthy and he's good to go. I think realistically that even if he does play, that his reps will be capped to an extent. Getting CMC even in a limited fashion can bode well for this Carolina offense. But once again, at 8,700, don't know that I want to pay to see where that cap is set for this week.
Are we talking the Millie Maker, or are we talking just a single entry tournament?
Let's talk Millie.
Millie, I would say less than 5.
All right. Well, then all of a sudden I could be interested if you catch my drift.
I think I'm fairly confident in that. I think he would. I think because a lot of players are going to set their lineups on Friday, Saturday, and they're not going to check back on Sunday. I think that you can feel confident in starting him at least less than 7% on Sunday.
Well, let's move on into the next game, and let's talk about the Lions at the Vikings, 49.5 for the over-under.
We don't have to.
We joked about this game a little bit during the show sheet, and Lions and Vikings. it could be fireworks. It could be absolutely nothing. Jared Goff once again checking in at a bottom dollar price tag of 5,300. Nate, I think you had some notes here on Jared Goff. Anything you want to add?
Let me try to read them. It says, I don't like it. My poor Lions.
And that is all we have for Jared Goff today at 5,300. Moving on into the running back section. And let's talk Vikings football. Dalvin Cook appears to be managing his reps due to the right ankle sprain that kept him on the sideline in week 3 while he suited up this past Sunday in the loss to the Browns. He was in and out of the lineup constantly and earned just about 51% of the offensive snaps by the end of the game, en route to 11 touches for 44 yards. Just given what we saw this past week and him still being limited by the injury, I think 8,400 once again is a lofty price tag, and I put him right up there with CMC as far as what you can expect from a production standpoint. It could be a huge boom, but once again, I'm leaning towards the safer play and probably not inserting him into any lineups unless it's a GPP that I feel like potentially even lighting my money on fire.
That was a real dick move. As far as Dalvin Cook goes, no, thank you. I mean, even versus the Lions, I don't know what his health is. I don't, Alexander Madison could be extremely involved. I'm not in with any of the Vikings minus Kirk Cousins or Justin Jefferson. If you want to talk to me about them guys, I'm locked and loaded in my tournaments, in my GPPs. I'm going to jump down to Justin Jefferson just because he's just the next person down in my show notes at 7,700. My show notes say the price is high. Did you write this, Dan?
I did write that. That price is
the price is fair, bro. The price
is right, Bobby.
The price is right, Bobby. So we're gonna go with it. It's a juicy matchup. The Lions secondary is absolute dog shit. We're gonna roll with it because the Lions secondary is all banged up. Justin Jefferson's gonna have absolutely nobody covering him. Absolutely nobody. And don't get me wrong, the ball could go to Thielen too, but we're going to roll with Jefferson because he's been on a hot streak. Kirk Cousins is going to throw all over these guys. Hopefully it lasts more than 2 quarters because they don't get up, 28 points after the first half. I love my Lions, but I'm being real with you in terms of fantasy, but the Lions defense is absolute crap. So I'm rolling with Justin Jefferson. I love Kirk Cousins. I love these 2 in GPPs this week, and I'm not afraid to lock them in.
Let's talk about the guy who really burned me this past week, in DeAndre Swift coming in at 6,100. He was one of my locks last week, and like many others, you were probably disappointed if you started him. And apologies if you went out there on my accord. Last week logged or so far has logged at least 56% of the snaps and 12 touches in every single game this season, despite being listed on the injury report week in and week out with the groin issue. It's what we've seen from the Lions. His questionable tag means nothing at this point other than they are keeping a close eye on that groin, and he will suit up weekly until he aggravates it further or something else comes into the mix. He'll head to Minnesota, though, for a road date with these Vikings this week, looking to rebound from his season worst outing in week 4 versus Chicago. Where are you at? He's still getting, just as many of the receiving looks as he has throughout the season. Coaching staff did come out today and said that they're going to take a hot hand approach, which doesn't feel like it really sheds light onto anything different other than what we're seeing, and that's that both of these running backs can potentially be valuable in this offense, given the construction of the offense with TJ Hawkinson and the 2 running backs being really the prime weapons based around Jared Goff, coming in at 5,300, like we mentioned. DeAndre Swift 6,100. Nate, we going back to him this week, or are the scars a little too fresh to really get into the paint with Swift again in week 5?
As the diehards Lions guy here, I mean, if I'm being real with you guys, there's zero reason to go back to it. We really don't know. If I'm going to turn anybody, it's going to be Swift at 6,100. To be honest with you, I don't think that we need to turn there. I think there's far better value and far better studs. So there's guys that are down here, that you can find, and guys that are up here that are far better. There's no reason to reach mid pack and go for Swift. I don't think he's better for anything more than, I don't know, maybe 18 to 20 points this week. And at his price tag, you're hitting, minimum value. So unfortunately, we have to separate our heart from our brain when it comes to fantasy football. So I'm out on Swift or Williams or any Detroit Lions for that matter this week.
I'll talk about one punt play at the wide receiver position for those Detroit Lions, and that is Amon-Ra St. Brown, coming in at 3,500 this week after totaling 10 total targets over the first 3 weeks of the season. Rookie St. Brown nearly reached that number Sunday alone as he shared the team lead targets with TJ Hawkinson. At 3,500 and a team that we know is going to be trailing more often than not most weeks. For a punt play and a GPP that you're getting a little different, maybe throw Amon-Ra into a lineup there at 3,500. I'm always looking to eyeball these 3 to 3.5 range guys that you can kind of plug in and allow you to do something special with the rest of your construction. So keep an eye on him this week. If the targets continue in another week that we expect Goff to drop back 40 to 50 times, Amon-Ra could be looking at some more work here. Let's move on into the next game, though, and stop running your Lions into the ground for a few minutes.
Appreciate that.
That would be the Packers at the Bengals with the point total of 50 currently. This is a game, that I am semi-excited about as well. Maybe Aaron Rodgers gets right. He's coming in at 7,100 this week. But the volume just hasn't been there, and he hasn't really looked like the Aaron Rodgers that we expected to see. Of course, the efficiency we knew was going to come down, but I think I'm still going to hold off on Aaron Rodgers. I've had a couple of Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams stacks to start through the first 4 weeks, and none of them have really paid off for me. I want to see them kind of get there before I'm willing to invest. Aaron Jones at 7,900. He's been questionable throughout the week. I think I'm leaning away from him this week just based off of the matchup there with a Bengals defense that hasn't looked terrible through the first 4 games of the season. Where are you at on any Packers this week in this matchup versus the Bengals?
It's kind of weird, but there's absolutely zero Packers that I'm in on as we stand right now. But as far as the Bengals go, the Cincinnati Bengals playing from behind, I kind of like that, the game script as far as that goes. So Joe Burrow is 6,100. I'm not really a huge fan of Joe Burrow. I'm not feeling it a ton, but there is the chance that, when we put together these GPP lineups, there's always going to be someone that shocks you. I think that could be Burrow this week. He's facing Aaron Rodgers, obviously. They're playing in Cincinnati, so I think Rodgers will keep the game competitive while Burrow will keep the game in Cincy. So the game script, I think it'll flow really well. I think this could be a high-scoring game. The projected point total as it stands right now is 50 points. I think it could be relatively close to that. I like both quarterbacks in this case. I prefer Burrow because he's a bit cheaper, but I also like Jamar Chase, the wide receiver for the Bengals, at 5,800. Chase has kind of come out this year, and while he hasn't absolutely stunned everybody, he's also put up really consistent numbers, and he's also kind of put the haters to rest at the same time. While he hasn't put out these drastic numbers, I think that'll continue this week against the Packers. Their defense took a massive hit because Jaire Alexander, he's gone with a shoulder injury. That opens up every freaking thing for this Bengals offense this week. And I think you're going to see everything change this week. Joe Mixon did not practice again. I think Mixon did not practice today, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no, he did not practice, and I am kind of leaning towards him as not being available this week, which would lead to some sort of a timeshare with Samaje Perine and Chris Evans, none of which I'm that interested in. If you are a firm believer in this being more of a shootout and the Packers running away with it. Chris Evans is coming in at 4,000, which I'd probably be more interested in over P. Ryan. With Joe Mixon likely to be out, Evans has shown the Bengals that he is a capable receiver out of the backfield. If Aaron Rodgers and co are able to get up on the Bengals, just like we like Joe Burrow as far as a passing option this week, maybe Chris Evans on a super large field GPP could be a good way to get really cheap with your RB2, so that way you can get a Kamara or a Henry in there for your RB1 spot.
So who takes over this backfield? Is it Samaje P. Ryan or is it Chris Evans?
I think I like Evans more. I think the upside is a little bit more instilled in his role there for the Bengals, while Samaje may get a little bit more of a consistent carry volume than Evans. I think that Evans really just kind of has that receiving upside that I don't think Samaje can really unlock even without Joe Mixon available.
I think whether you're playing DFS, Dynasty, or Redraft, you are better off putting your marbles in the Chris Evans basket.
Definitely.
Just my thought. But yeah, we'll move on to we'll move on past the Bengals Packers game. Was there anything else you want to cover there?
No, that's it. Let's go ahead and move on into the Patriots at Texans with a point total of 39.5. Kind of a lackluster game here. Nate, kick us off. Who is some guys that if we are targeting any in this game, who would it be? I think more often than not, we're probably not going to have many, but I know there's one guy from this game that you are super high on this week. So kick it off with his quarterback, Mac Jones, coming in at 5,300.
So what we're going to do is, you mentioned the Patriots, Texans, and you mentioned Mac Jones. I'm going to skip him because that's not my favorite play of this game. My favorite play is Jacoby Myers at 5,600, Patriots wide receiver. I think Jacoby Myers, and it's been all over Twitter this week. It's no damn secret. Jacoby Myers he became like the nothing story of he's well due. And, the problem is that I've been on this for 2 weeks and now everybody's on it. And now I'm like the old story, but you know what? I'm going to stick with it. Jacoby Myers, he became the starter in week 7 of last year for the Pats. Since then, he has a 28.4% target share. This is going back to week 7 of last year. That's 11 games since now. Only Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams have a higher target share. His air yardage is over 30%. That is relatively, outside of 1 or 2 game scripts, that's unheard of. 26 targets in the last 2 weeks, 41 targets on the year. The fact that he has no touchdown right now is borderline ridiculous. And I want to say, the touchdown's coming this week, but versus the Texans, they're, I believe, 9th against defensive backs. It might not even happen this week, but the point is that I think Jacoby Myers is a lock and load. And I know this is a DFS, podcast, but he's a lock and load for sure for the rest of your season long leagues. For DFS, you can lock him in every week at 5,600. You can lock him in this week. If he scores a touchdown, he's already hit value. If he doesn't, he didn't. But I think, he's due to hit. So I think Jacoby Myers he's one of my favorite plays this week. At some point he's going to hit pay dirt. There's no freaking way he doesn't keep missing out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been a big time supporter of Jacoby, even since back before Cam Newton. But Mac Jones 5,300, Jacoby Myers at 5,600. You can get a quarterback with his wide receiver 1 for less than 11,000. That could be a GPP stack there for you all day. But if you're not a firm believer in the Patriots passing attack this week, maybe I can talk you into Damian Harris at 5,500, another running back that's kind of in the 5K range that I don't mind. Really, really running backs. I like the guys in the 6K range, and I'm typically trying to target guys somewhere in the 6K range because there's usually a handful of them. All have the upside, all have the risk. But hitting on those guys, I think, can really prove dividends for your roster build throughout the day. But Damian Harris, 5,500, The Patriots are 9-point favorites in this matchup against Houston, and that should mean a run-heavy script as far as I'm concerned for the Pats. Houston has allowed 28.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, good enough for 6th worst in the NFL, while also allowing the 5th most opponent rushing attempts per game with 30.8. They are PFF's 7th worst graded run defense and the 3rd worst rush defense by Football Outsiders DVOA. Harris is set up here nicely with a what I call a thin running back room at this point for the New England Patriots, while Mac Jones is purely capable, and I think Belichick recognizes that. Their bread and butter is still with the run game. Damian Harris, 5,508. Did I sell you enough?
If we're being real, no, I'm not sold at all. There's a lot of fantasy analysts that are sold on Damian Harris this week, but I'm just not bought in. You know, it's nothing personal, but I think there's plenty of value and plenty of studs this week, so you can get, you know, that high-low mix. So I don't really to get into that median turn, you know, that medium of players. I'm just not really there. You know, even moving forward past that, I'm not. My audio kind of broke up for a second, so I'm not sure if you mentioned Brandon Cooks or not.
No, go ahead. He's the only piece really in that Houston offense that you could have any interest in at 6,100 this week.
Yeah, even over the last year or two, you know, Brandon Cooks was like the guy that, you know, everybody didn't want a piece of the, you know, the Texans offense outside of Deshaun Watson. And obviously his name is redacted now, so we're not going to talk about him. So we're moving forward to Cooks, but with redacted gone now, I mean, Cooks is a guy that we can't even touch at this point, even at 6,100. I mean, his numbers just aren't there. There's no reason to play him. I mean, it sucks, you know, it's sad to see. And, you know, Coach Craig is one of our big supporters, and that's his favorite team. And, you know, he can join my depth of my Lions team, so we can weep together. But
between Coach Craig's Texans, your Lions, and my
Falcons, your Falcons, oh
man, we are just, you know, having a poo
it's
party.
It's a Nirvana song, bro.
Yeah, no, we're gonna somebody write that down. Whoever's in the comments, jot that down for me. Yeah, Mills, puke, puke, puke. Yeah, there it is. All right, let's move on into the next game and not waste any more time on those putrid Texans down there. And we are talking about, let's see here, the Saints at the Washington football team with a point total of 44.5. The Saints, once again this week, there's only one guy that I'm interested in, and that is Alvin Kamara, paying up for him this week at 8,600 after entering the year with only one game over 20 carries. Kamara has now topped that mark 3 times through 4 weeks. And Sunday's 26 rush attempts represented a career high for Alvin Kamara. Now that Tony Jones has also been moved to IR with an ankle injury, Kamara is set to continue his massive workload against a Washington football team that is allowing 400-plus yards on a weekly basis. Talk me out of Alvin Kamara at 8,600, Nate.
I think that the reason I'm going to talk out of Alvin Kamara is because I much prefer Saquon Barkley at 7,300. And I think you're getting the same upside and the same rushing yards and the same everything for a very far cheaper price. So it's a kind of short answer, but give me Saquon at 7,300. I'm a little bit in love this week.
I don't think anybody is going to fault you there. What about, Washington football team quarterback Taylor Heineke, 5,900. Heineke won me a little bit of cash last week. I might have to go back to him again this week. But the Saints defense, while can be tough at times, hasn't proved to be exactly as stout as we thought they were going into the year. And I don't mind him this week for GPPs. First off, he's played well with Ryan Fitzpatrick down, throwing for 8 passing touchdowns and added another one on the ground while only throwing 3 interceptions. The passing yardage has been up and down with 2 games under 215. One was week 1 while coming in after the injury. but also added 336 in week 2 and 290 last week against the Falcons. 45 yards rushing as well in week 4. You in on Heineke this week again, Nate?
So I'm going to go a little bit long-winded here on a lot of the Washington players real quick. I like Heineke. It depends on what you're talking about, though. If you're talking cash or if you're talking GPP. If you're talking cash, I prefer Daniel Jones at just $100 more at $6K. If we're talking GPPs, I'm going to put my money on Taylor Heineke, spend $100 down less because everybody is going to be on Daniel Jones this week in cash play. I promise you, he's I want to say at least 27% owned in GPPs. I think Taylor Heineke will be under 15%. With that in mind, we're going to look at the rest of because when we play, GPPs or cash, we're going to want to stack. So I'm going to look at, with Taylor Heineke being my focal point, for this week, I want to look at the rest of the Washington football team. We have Terry McLaurin. He's 7,400. I like that, but the problem is the season's been up and down like a roller coaster. He has 34 targets, 21 receptions, 3 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. The problem is that his scores have been up over 30, down under 12, up over 30, down under 12, and that's not something we can buy into as far as betting. What I do like is Curtis Samuel, $3,000. Yes, he, was relatively quiet last week when he made his return to, after his groin injury. He had a 19-yard reception, and, he didn't do a whole lot. I think he had 4 receptions last week. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 4 receptions on 4 targets in his return back last week. But, that was his return back. I think with the injuries to Diami Brown and there was one other guy, Logan Thomas, the tight end. He had an injury too. So the Washington football team is down 2 receivers. So Curtis Samuel, $3,000, Ricky Seals-Jones, 2,500. These are the 2 best values you're going to find on the slate. There's no way you're going to find a better value. They'll be highly owned, yes, but if they hit, you're going to be fine because you can plug your studs in. So don't be afraid of Curtis Samuel or Ricky Seals-Jones hitting 60% or even 50%. It's going to happen, but just fit these cheap guys in to plug your studs in. And there's also the chance Curtis Samuel and Ricky Seals-Jones could also put up duds. So that's why they're GPPs and not cash plays. So don't put them in your cash lineups. I want to really, really, really premise that. Do not put them in your cash lineups.
Yeah, let's move on into the next game, though. Titans at the Jaguars, 48.5 points here for the total. Ryan Tannehill, lackluster first 4 weeks. Maybe is getting his wide receiver 1 back in A.J. Brown this week. Tannehill coming in at 6,400 with a great matchup against these Jaguars that have been pretty much destroyed most weeks. I don't mind necessarily Tannehill here. 6,400 though, I feel like you could pay up just a little bit more and get a guy that actually has done it. But if you are looking to get in on Tannehill for his first really kind of impressive performance of the year and maybe have some lower ownership, 6,400 is not bad. A.J. Brown coming in at 6,500. This is a guy that we were all super high on coming into the year. Hasn't really put it together once again, just like with Ryan Tannehill. At 6,500, I'll probably have some AJB exposure. Didn't play in week 4 against the Jets, but he seems to be heading in the right direction, practicing the last couple of days. Julio Jones, however, is still absent from practice. And I think AJB could be a great GPP play this week at 6,500. I really like the opportunity he has here. Nate, you want to add anything there about A.J. Brown?
I don't. There's nothing I really want to add about A.J. Brown, but there's a whole lot I want to add about Derrick Henry. He is the highest priced player on the DraftKings slate, and it does not scare me away one bit at all. Henry is showing no signs of slowing down in 2021. He's averaging 30 plus carries per game, 28.1 fantasy points per game, and has scored 30 or more twice during that during his streak between the week 2 versus Seattle outing where he had 6 receptions. Henry had 15 targets heading into week 5. That's higher than Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara, who both had 14, which is absolutely astonishing when you look back to everything we know about fantasy football. It doesn't even seem like it makes sense. But that's fact. That's the fact of the matter. It is what it is. He has a 10% target share in the season, and what the difference is that the fact of the matter is that the Titans have a new coaching staff, and they're making while it's not like the most focal thing in the offense, the fact is that they're making Henry like just even a little bit of a portion of the passing game, and that little bit is making a difference. And for fantasy owners, it's making Henry something that is probably going to be the highest scoring fantasy player in the year, even if it's just a tiny bit. So Henry is probably, while he's $9,000 on the weekend, he's probably going to be the most dangerous weapon on the year right now, unless he gets hurt, and that's just how it's going to be.
Yes, so long as he's getting the targets that we've all kind of joked
It's
about.
sick, bro.
I mean, there's really nothing stopping Derrick Henry from being a top 3 running back on a weekly basis, especially with the inefficiency that we've seen of Tannehill and the passing company. But let's keep it moving here. James Robinson, 6,000. Robinson played a whopping 95% of snaps in week 4 after Carlos Hyde was a surprise scratch prior to the game. On Thursday Night Football, Robinson totaled 18 carries, 78 yards, and 2 scores. With a goal line carries to himself, J-Rob made the most of it. It is unknown at this time, as of now, if Hyde will be available versus Tennessee, but if this game should be highly competitive either way, as both teams desperately need a win. James Robinson at 6,000. Now that he is getting the bulk of the work there, I don't mind him. The receiving work is going to be there on a weekly basis, just due to the nature of that Jacksonville team constantly coming from behind. Marvin Jones at 5,700 once again is another quality play. The Titans defense has allowed the second most fantasy points to wideouts, including the 6th most points to receivers lined out wide and the most points to the slot receiver position. With DJ Chark on injured reserve, Jones and Chenault should both see plenty of opportunities. LaVisca coming in at a reasonable 4,800 this week also has my interest. Jones leads the team with 31 targets this season, while Chenault has 27. Titans are 30th in pass DVOA and 31st in adjusted sack rate. With Chark out, this receiving core really condenses into a quality opportunity for both Marvin Jones and LaVisca Chenault.
Yeah, there's 2 things I like about the Jags this week. One of them is Marvin Jones, and the other one is not LaVisca Chenault. The fact that DJ Chark is out, I will never victory lap an injury. That freaking sucks. He's a great young player. But, one of these guys, ultimately is going to benefit. Is it going to be Chenault? Is it going to be Jones? Everybody is gambling their numbers on Chenault being the beneficiary. I think it's going to be Marvin Jones. He had a down week last week. He had 3 targets. I want to say it was 3 targets. I could be wrong. It was definitely under 5. So I think Jones is going to be super high, super low owned this week and super unappreciated. And I think you can cash in on Jones this week for some really solid numbers at 5,700.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on into the afternoon games at this point, Nate, and starting with the Bears at the Raiders with the 46 points. Justin Fields has been named the starter moving forward, according to Matt Nagy, coming in at 5,200 this week. David Montgomery obviously is not going to be available. So what do we make of Justin Fields this week? 5,200. The fantasy points really haven't been there. While he looked a lot better this past week than the week before, what are we expecting out of Justin Fields against a Raiders defense that has given problems to quarterbacks, quite frankly, throughout the start of the season? But 5,200 without David Montgomery, maybe we see a little bit more rushing upside out of Justin Fields. And at that price point, a little bit more rushing upside could go a long way.
I think this Raiders defense is I think it's fairly underrated. I think Fields is as far as me and you go, that I respect him a ton. I love him as a quarterback prospect. As far as him stepping into his second start at the NFL level versus the Raiders defense, I think they're pretty young and underrated. I think this could maybe I think it could get messy. I think it's going to be entertaining no matter what. I don't really know how this is going to turn out. I'm honestly kind of going off script here, but I think that I think with Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney and that deep shot, and with the intrigue of Allen Robinson kind of struggling this year, and then you got John Gruden and the Raiders defense. I think this is making out for a great game. I'm just excited to watch it, to be honest. And if we're talking fantasy, I'm kind of going to bet on the Raiders defense. I think they're underrated, and I think they're going to kind of shut Fields down back, just put him back in check just a tiny bit. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but I think they're just going to, put him back down just for a second.
What about Damian Williams stepping in for the injured David Montgomery? Williams coming in at 5,600, kind of once again in that 5K price range that we've talked about a couple of other running backs. I think Williams is really going to come in and probably see 70% of the carries there for Chicago. He could prove to be a value at 5,600. It just comes down to really the weapons around Justin Fields, and if Damian Williams can capitalize like we saw David Montgomery capitalize this past week, 5,600, he could prove to be one of the better values on the slate at 5,600.
Yeah, he should absolutely see at least 70% of the carries. I mean, with the way, Tariq Cohen's not due back, I believe, until week 7. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's week 7. Dave Montgomery's out, so it's all the Damian Williams show. I added him in a lot of season-long leagues, and I spent a bunch of fab, and I'm not even excited a little bit. So that tells you what it is for DFS. I'm probably not going to be playing him, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
I do want to touch base on Hunter Renfrow, 4,900, 30 targets through the first 4 weeks, remains Carr's security blanket.
That dude's a beast.
He has looked good and has looked like an all-around great football player through the first 4 weeks, while everybody was kind of giving him shit throughout the prospect. Just him has really blossomed into a great football player there for the Raiders. And 4,900 feels like a pretty safe option. You can work him into a cash lineup at that price point. I don't mind him, but we can move on into the next game, Nate, and that is going to be the Browns at the Chargers with a 50-point over-under currently. Where are you at on this game? Who are we targeting? Justin Herbert was a go-to guy for me this past week, and he came through, quite frankly. Are you in on Justin Herbert this week at 6,800?
A lot of guys like Herbert. I don't mind Herbert. I've never really had an issue against or for Herbert, but I'm kind of looking at some of the values this week. As far as Kareem Hunt goes, there's a couple surprising facts about Kareem Hunt at 5,800 that a lot of people don't know. 3 or 4 games, he scored a touchdown every game. He's also dropped $200 this week. So you're getting a guy that's scored in 3 or 4 games and his price has dropped $200. So sounds like stupid math, but to me, I mean, that's not rocket science. It means, you lock him in $5,800. He scored 3 or 4 times. Good chance that the Browns play behind against the Chargers. So Hunt is going to be in on those, passing downs and, those, third downs. So Hunt's going to be, getting those pass receptions. This is a Kareem Hunt type game. At 5,800, I think you lock him in and cash and GPP. You're not going to go wrong. I think you lock him in.
Yeah, he's really one of the only Browns that I'm really interested in this week.
Yeah,
again, if you do go Herbert 6,800, you are going to pay up for Mike Williams 7,200 and Keenan Allen 6,500. But like you mentioned, this Browns defense has been pretty stingy. Kind of just feels like a slower paced game in general, and I wouldn't mind hitting the under on the point totals this week for this matchup. But let's move on into the next game. That's the 49ers at the Cardinals with a 50-point over-under currently. What are you doing here in this matchup? Who are you targeting here in this matchup, Nate?
Do you know what? To be honest, man, where my main focus has been honestly kind of on the Trey Lance, Jimmy G situation. I don't know where you've been on this. I've been I've paid so much attention to the Trey Lance, Jimmy G situation that I really haven't, focused on the Kyler Murray stats. I know he's priced at 8K, and I know that's expensive as shit. But where I'm kind of looking at, if I'm going to hit, any players in this game, it's got to be at Lance. That's 5,700. A lot of people, my problem is that, when he came in last week, he did not play well. He did not. I don't care what anybody says. Y'all can come at me. He did not look like an NFL ready quarterback. Yeah, I don't care. He did not look like an NFL ready quarterback. He did not look good at all. The thing is with fantasy, you don't have to be good at NFL football to be good at fantasy. He looked great at fantasy. He has the rushing upside. If he can rush the ball, that's all we give a shit about. He did good, man. I mean, as far as, running the ball, he was great. But when it comes to like actual NFL production, I'm worried. But when he's, when going in this game this week, I don't against the Cardinals. I would love to see a Lance Hopkins shootout, or a Kyler Murray Trey Lance shootout. That's like the matchup of my dreams as far as like NFL goes. So that's something I want to see. I think Jimmy G's done. I've been reading a lot of reports since I got out of work at 7:30, and it looks like Jimmy G's pretty depressed and looks like he's not coming back from his calf injury. So it looks like we're gonna get that matchup on paper. But I as far as any of these players go in this game, basically I'm gonna cover this all in one big spectrum. I think any of these players in this game, from Kyler Murray to Trey Lance to DeAndre Hopkins to Brendan Ayuk, anybody, any of these guys, any of these running backs, anybody, this is going to be a really fun game, and I can't wait to watch.
So if it's currently set at 50, are you taking the over or the under on this game right here?
What's the point differential?
50 points. Or I don't have that here.
Oh, well, I would say the projected point total is over 50 if I had to guess, but I don't know what the spread is from Vegas.
Yeah, I'm taking the over here as well. I do like Trey Lance this week, and if we do get a green light on him and Jimmy G being out, I will have a lot of Trey Lance exposure this
is going to be an exciting game, man. This is going to be really fun to watch. And, Trey Lance doesn't have to be perfect for this to be fun.
Yeah,
or good for fantasy.
Let's talk about the Cowboys, though, and the Giants. Giants visiting the Cowboys with 52-point over-under. Some fireworks I'm expecting again in this Cowboys game. And I know you mentioned Daniel Jones earlier, but what about Dak Prescott at 6,900? Giants defense really hasn't looked great. According to fantasydata.com, Dak is ranked as the QB 12 overall and is third overall with 10 passing touchdowns. Although 40% of those touchdowns came last week, he had a rough outing in week 2, but has been solid otherwise. Speaking of last week, Dallas jumped out to a 3-possession lead late in the third quarter, which limited Prescott's upside and ability for the rest of the game. I think he may have just slightly lower ownership this week, although a lot of eyes will be on this game with a projected point total of 52. I think Prescott will do well this week, and I like him as a slight paydown option from the top price QBs for cash builds.
Yeah, we see Kyler and them guys at $8,000, and a couple other people priced higher. I think Dak has been relatively consistent. If you eliminate the week, I believe it was the week 1 performance where it wasn't really great. I think you can count on Dak in cash to put you up, a solid 25 points. I really like Dak this week. I think people are kind of jumping off the bandwagon despite, the fact that he's been good the last 3 weeks. Ezekiel Elliott, $7,000. He's been extremely consistent. He had over the last 3 games, he's averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game. The problem is that he also has a 37.8 touchdown dependency. So with that in mind, with touchdown dependency means he has to have a touchdown to, hit value in fantasy. So if you're going to play Zeke, you have to count on the touchdown. Um, if I think you can still play him this week. I think it's a good matchup. I think it's $7,000. Don't be afraid to play him, but he's going to have to get you a touchdown or he's not going to hit value, because when you're playing these players, if they don't have value, you're losing.
Yeah, definitely. But as far as the wide receivers go, Amari Cooper, 6,100, had a little bit better of a bounce back week this past week. But CeeDee Lamb coming in again at 6,200. That's right around where he was priced this past week, and I was all over it. And it was a pretty big letdown between him and Swift. I had enough exposure that really kind of capped into my upside this past week. So I'm a little sour on Lamb, as I'm sure many others are. Could look for him to have a bounce back game this week. And quite frankly, Cooper, Lamb, and Dak are really all cheap enough if you're looking to get a large stack. The problem is Dak tends to spread the ball around, whether it be to his tight end, Dalton Schultz, who had another good performance, as well as Blake Jarwin this past week. Schultz, though, now has back-to-back games with at least 7 targets, also has 138 yards while receiving 3 touchdowns in that span as his role continues to grow. He will see snaps to Blake Jarwin on a weekly basis, but as of right now, the way that Schultz is playing, I don't know that you can ignore him. Gets priced up a little bit this week at 4,400, but still in play, and a great way to get a hold of a piece of this Dallas offense if you're looking to get out from the really cash plays in Cooper, Lamb, and Dak himself. Schultz is in play this week at 4,400.
Yeah, I love the Schultz. Kind of is like the alternative to the Cowboys wide receivers. But sticking with that game, there's no way we're going to get through this without talking about Daniel Jones. I think he's going to be one of the highest owned cash and GPP plays this weekend. I don't know what his ownership will be. I just think it'll be extremely freaking high because he's looked really good this year somehow. And he's playing the Cowboys defense that while they're picking passes off, they're also allowing big plays. So Jones has allowed at least 249, or Jones has at least 249 passing yards per game in every game, with a per game average of 296 yards. He also has a solid mobility with at least 27 yards rushing each week, which we want the rushing yards in fantasy. That's a freaking huge upside. That equals out to 47 fantasy points per game. That's a humongous number. The passing volume should be plentiful, and I wouldn't be afraid to smash the over on this game. So when we're looking at Daniel Jones, I think if you're playing cash, if we're talking just like me and you, Dan, and the listeners, I think you should play Jones. I think he's great for cash, but I think if you're playing GPP, I don't think he'll be over like 25%, but I think you can also hit Taylor Heineke. People are probably gonna. I could be wrong. I think you can hit Taylor Heineke at $100 less, and I think you could hit probably 15% less ownership. Heineke has yet to fail to produce for us. You know what I mean? He's hit a solid 20 to 25, 27% or 20 fantasy points per week. So while Jones seems like the guy you want to focus in on, I think there's other guys around his number. If you're playing GPP, if you're playing cash, grab Jones. If you're playing GPP though, there's other guys around him that I would recommend. And I could be wrong, but that's just how I feel.
What about Saquon Barkley, 7,300 this week? Kind of had the bounce back outing that we were looking for all year long. Started the year out slow, but recovering from that injury that he did suffer, it was what we expected. But last week he really kind of showed that he still has that receiving ability, that true game-breaking, skill, if you will. He's yet to eclipse 60 rushing yards in a game this year, but has found the end zone twice on the ground and been more involved in the passing game, primarily the last 2 weeks. and he has 13 targets, 11 receptions, and a touchdown through the air. Gets a Cowboys defense that has been giving up huge plays this year. If some of the receivers are unable to go, it really helps Barkley with the receiving upside that he could see. Maybe a few extra targets go his way with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, both potentially still going to miss this week. Galladay questionable as far as I know, but I am expecting him to play.
Barkley is one of my favorite plays of the week. Barkley is my lock and load of the week at running back. So, 4 weeks ago, you guys would have been like, no way that's possible. I wouldn't have thought that either, but he's back to form. He looks like the Saquon Barkley that we all, wanted 2 years ago. Saquon Barkley is back to form. He looks dynamic. He looks elusive. This is the guy that we love to watch. Saquon Barkley at 7,300. He's not going to stay at this price. Put him in your lineups, cash, GPP, lock him in. He's my lock of the week by far. 100, hands down, my favorite play of the week.
Yeah, and as good friend of the show, Bo is saying, this is a game stack that you can get, basically different in a bunch of ways. It's not a game stack that you're going to be targeting and ending up with the same pieces as everybody else, just due to Zeke Elliott and Barkley, both running backs. Maybe you could try to get both of those guys into a lineup, kind of fade the passing game a little bit more, because these are both two running backs that we love this week. While you're going to have to pay $7,000 plus for both of them, I think this is a game that you can attack in many different facets, whether it be an onset slot, or just really getting in different pieces wherever you see fit. We mentioned Dalton Schultz, kind of a cheaper way to get into this game, but I do like attacking this game. And there's the pieces to do it all over the place. Any interest in Kadarius Toney this week or Evan Ingram? Ingram has been a guy that I have been, kind of moving into my tight end punt barrel the last couple weeks since he's come back from injury. As we mentioned, though, with Kenny Galladay and Barkley, the receiving options have condensed there for the Giants slightly, leaving to a little bit more intrigue for Evan Ingram. While he didn't really pop off this past week, he didn't hurt you. I think 4 catches, 40 yards, something in there. But you're paying, once again, bottom barrel prices, which is typically what I like to do at the tight end position. Another cheap way to get a hold of this game with Evan Ingram, who's, $1,200 cheaper than Schultz. And I like Schultz, but maybe Evan Ingram's a way that you can save and get a piece of this action for a game that I want to attack in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, so I don't have Tony's price in front of me, but I believe it was 4,400. If anybody out there can correct me, I believe I'm about 95% sure it was 4,400. I love that price against the Cowboys. Considering the fact that plenty of Giants wide receivers could be out, you're talking about a pure punt play that could completely cash in. He looked good last week. He's that type of dynamic player that's going to, if he's the plug and play player that is dynamic for that position, he's the kind of guy you want in that spot. So I believe Kadarius Toney was 4,400. I'm almost positive, and I love him there. He's actually in a few of my lineups already. I just don't remember exactly if it was 4,400. I'm pretty sure. Was I wrong?
No, I think you're good. I think that is our last game also this evening. So, Nate, is there anything else you want to say? Anybody who you want to shout out other than the folks in the comments? Coach Carrig, Bo, Kay, Trav was up in here. Everybody who did tune in, we appreciate you guys. Sticking around with us tonight, talking a little bit of DFS, the main slate coming up this Sunday. Anybody you want to shout out there, Nate, or anything you want to bring up, potentially our article? When will it be live for the people there at truenorthffb.com?
Yeah, so I do want to give a shout out to everybody that tunes in and watches. That means a tremendous amount to us. Right now, we're kind of watching for our article is already written. We're waiting for the graphic from Dan May Graphics. He's a little bit under the weather, so as soon as we get that graphic, that will be released. It could be anywhere from tonight till Saturday. We're kind of waiting to see how Dan feels. We totally understand how he's feeling. I was under the weather earlier this week, so I totally get it. as soon as that article, as soon as that graphic's ready, our article's ready to rock and roll. So we're ready to go there. Check out the new TNNF, True North Fantasy Football website. We've got a lot of cool stuff going on there. We've got Connor with the starts and sits. We've got Jason Ferris, with the fantasy football trends. We've got just a bunch of writers that are putting out great content every week. They're rocking it out, and it's a pleasure to edit their stuff. It's not a burden. It's just complete. It's fun for me to watch them evolve as writers every week. So I love all of that. I want to give a shout out to the Sports Me family. It's not affiliated with True North, but they're a very, very big part of my sports family, and they're very supportive, and they support our network as well. They retweet a lot of our stuff. They do a lot of great things for me. So I appreciate everybody at the Sports Me, from Robbie to, just everybody over there. I just love all you guys. And that's about it for that.
Hey, Robert Williams, appreciate you tuning in tonight, man. I hope you continue to come back and get some DFS content from SODFS. I want to make sure everybody also knows that we are officially on Apple Podcasts. And as of right now, if you go over there to Apple Podcasts, follow the show, leave us a rating and review, and you will instantly be entered into a chance to win an SODFS t-shirt from our friends there at Viridian Global. So it only takes a second. Go over there, give us a rating and review. Even if you want to tell us that it's terrible, you will still get put into the drawing to win a terrible DFS show t-shirt, and you could have that for your very own. So please give us a rating and review. I think we're hitting nothing but 5 stars at this point, but I can remain humble. You throw a 4, maybe even a 3, anything lower than a 3, and we might have words via one way or another. But until next time, I am Dan, he is Nate, and I appreciate everybody tuning in here tonight. Nate, anything else before we do get out of here?
I just want to say I love you all. Thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely. Appreciate absolutely everybody who did tune in. And until next time, enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Enjoy the rest of this game. Much love to everybody.
SODFS is for entertainment only and to add value to your sports experience. We give you our advice and strategy that we will employ ourselves. SODFS is not intended for those under the age of 18.